The Jagdtiger, too heavy for battle. The Jagdtiger became the culmination of the development of Germany's tank destroyers during the Hitler era. This large, unwieldy machine, created on the basis of the heavy Tiger I tank, had a voluminous and well-armored cabin that managed to house a large-caliber gun. As with the Tiger heavy tanks, German designers turned their sights to anti-aircraft artillery, settling on the 128 mm FlaK 40 anti-aircraft gun. The resulting combat vehicle was virtually invulnerable in a frontal duel with all Allied tanks. At the same time, the Jagdtiger itself could easily hit enemy tanks from very long distances, thanks to the monstrous power and armor penetration of its 128 mm gun with a 55 caliber barrel length. However, such capability came at the cost of the machine's huge combat mass. Over 70 tons, the weight had a negative impact on the running gear and mobility of the Jagdtiger, which some critics sarcastically called not a tank destroyer but a mobile bunker. The ultimate weapon, the Jagdtiger tank destroyer, was developed in Germany from 1942 to 1944 using the chassis of the Heavy King Tiger, or, as it is also called, Tiger II tank. The main purpose of the self-propelled gun was to combat Allied armored vehicles. On the one hand, it was an attempt to create a wonder weapon. On the other hand, it was a prospective anti-tank tool capable of effectively holding back hordes of enemy tanks during a retreat. Throughout the second half of the war, the Germans balanced between creating quite interesting armored vehicles and projects of highly questionable value and labor intensity. The Jagdtiger was somewhat in the middle between these two extremes. The self-propelled gun was initially supposed to have a gun that would leave no chances for any Allied tank, and with this task, the German designers coped. As with the heavy Tiger tanks, the designers turned to existing anti-aircraft guns. Upping this, the base chosen was the 128 mm FlaK 40 anti-aircraft gun, transformed into the Peak 44 AL-55 anti-tank gun with a 55 caliber barrel length. The variant for the self-propelled gun received the index stuck 44. The 28-kilogram armor-piercing projectile of this gun penetrated the frontal armor of all Allied tanks and remained relevant up to the year 1948. At least, that is the assessment among some experts today. Even at a distance of 2 kilometers, the armor-piercing projectile of this gun with a ballistic cap could penetrate 190 mm of armor at an encounter angle of 30 degrees from normal. The first tank that could withstand fire from it was the most mass-produced American tank of World War II. The Sherman. This gun did not leave any chances. American tanks were hit at distances between 2.5 and 3.5 kilometers. Here, it was not so much the armor penetration of the 128 EM projectile that mattered as the very possibility of making a direct shot at such a distance. This projectile also didn't leave chances for the heavy Sovietist. The rifled 128 EM gun was quite bulky and heavy. For this reason, the designers implemented an unusual design, foregoing the classical mounting of the gun typically used for anti-tank specie. The 128 mm gun was installed inside the cabin on a special pedestal that was placed on the floor of the fighting compartment. The gun had great power and heavy recoil, which negatively affected the running gear of the Jagdtiger, which was already a weak point of the machine. For this reason, firing was mainly carried out from a stationary position. The gun's ammunition consisted of 38-40 shells, both armor-piercing and according to the memories of the famous German tank commander Otto Curius. The 8-meter gun barrel of the tank destroyer wobbled after just a short off-road journey. After that, aiming accurately with the weapon became extremely problematic. The Jagdtiger needed maintenance and repair. He also viewed the design of the travel lock, which secured the 128 mm gun in the travel position, as unsuccessful. The lock could not be released from inside the SPHG. Therefore, one of the crew members had to temporarily leave the combat vehicle. Complications with excess weight. The King Tiger, on the basis of which the Jagdtiger was designed, was not a successful machine in terms of running gear and dynamic characteristics either. In the tank destroyer version, with enhanced armor and powerful gun, the running gear felt terribly bad, and the Jagdtiger itself naturally suffered from obesity. The combat weight of the self-propelled gun could reach 75 tons. For such a mass, the Maybach HHL 230 engine with a power of 700 HP was definitely insufficient. But the Germans had nothing else at the time. For comparison, the same engine was fitted to the Panther, the combat mass of which was almost 30 tons less. It is not surprising that the mobile bunker turned out to be unwieldy, had poor dynamics, and could not accelerate faster than 17 km/h in cross-country terrain. Moreover, the engine consumed an enormous amount of fuel at a time when Germany was already facing a shortage. The Jagdtiger's range did not exceed 170 km on the road and only 70 km off-road. Another issue was that not every bridge could support a self-propelled gun weighing more than 70. The unfinished hulls of Jagdtiger tank destroyers. The obesity of the combat vehicle was caused not only by the use of a monstrously powerful gun, the anti-tank version of which weighed more than 9 tons, but also by the most robust armor. The hull, which the self-propelled gun inherited practically unchanged from the King Tiger, had its upper frontal plate 150 mm thick set at 40 degrees. The lower armor plate was 120 mm thick, installed at the same angle. The best armored part was the cabin, which was made from pre-war armor plates designed for the Kriegsmarine. The thickness of its frontal armor was 250 mm, with an inclination angle of 15 degrees. The tanks and anti-tank artillery of the Allies were not capable of penetrating this armor. The armor and the gun partly compensated for the self-propelled gun's low mobility characteristics and the unreliability of the running gear, which simply couldn't handle such weight. If the self-propelled gun managed to occupy a position, it could confidently hit enemy armored vehicles without worrying too much about maneuverability. Moreover, the vehicle was not inconspicuous. The Jagdtiger was almost 3 meters high. It was a real problem to conceal the self-propelled gun in the terrain, something that American ground attack aviation, dominating the battlefield, took advantage. Even anti-aircraft spas like the Wehrmacht, FlaK Panzer, and Ostwind, which were attached to Jagdtiger battalions, did not help much. Combat usage. Jagdtiger tank destroyers were serially produced from 1944 to 1945, almost until the very end of World War II. However, this particular anti-tank self-propelled gun turned out to be very complex and expensive. Coupled with the destruction of factories by air bombings from Allied aviation and disruptions in the supply of parts and materials due to the increasingly catastrophic situation for Germany on the front, the industry managed to produce an extremely small number of Jagdtiger. Estimates of the total produced range from 79 to 88 of these gigantic self-propelled guns. All the Jagdtiger tanks that were built and deployed by the troops fought within 2 separate heavy anti-tank battalions. These were the 512th and 653rd Heavy Anti-Tank Battalions, which mainly operated on the Western Front during the late winter of 1944 and the spring of 1945. Due to their limited numbers, these combat vehicles were unable to make a significant contribution to the course of combat operations. Nevertheless, in several battles, the Jagdtigers proved their effectiveness, inflicting substantial damage on the advancing Allied forces. The commander of the 2nd Company of the 512th Heavy Anti-Tank Battalion was the German tank Ace Otto Carius. In March 1945, 6 Jagdtigers from his tank company successfully defended the bridge over the Rhine in the area of Remagen. Without losing a single self-propelled gun, the Germans repelled attacks by Allied tanks, destroying a significant number of armored vehicles. In these battles, the power of the 128 mm gun was confirmed once again, as it had no problem hitting Sherman tanks at distances of 2.5 and even 3 km. For other tanks, the Jagdtigers were practically invulnerable. Striking them head-on was extremely problematic, especially at distances from which the Germans could already conduct effective fire. It is known that a large part of the losses of the 653rd Battalion was not due to enemy tank actions, but was the result of air strikes and artillery barrages. 30%. Another 70% of the self-propelled guns were lost due to technical reasons or defects and were blown up by their crews. Jagdtigers were also destroyed due to the depletion of fuel and ammunition. Nonetheless, Soviet tankers did manage to claim one Jagdtiger from the 653rd Heavy Anti-Tank Battalion. On May 6, 1945, a Jagdtiger from this battalion was hit in Austria while attempting to break through to American forces. The tank destroyer crew was unable to blow up the vehicle under fire from Soviet forces, which then became a legitimate trophy of the Red Army. Today, this self-propelled gun can be seen by anyone interested in the Armored Vehicle Museum. And it should be noted that the Germans themselves understood all the vulnerabilities of the Jagdtiger and its weak points, immediately equipping the combat vehicle with stationary demolition charges for self-destruction. Admittedly, this wasn't a very common practice. The charges were placed under the engine and under the breech of the gun. The crew was supposed to use them in case of technical failure and the impossibility of evacuating the self-propelled gun to the rear. On one hand, the demolition charges helped ensure that the enemy could not capture the unique combat equipment in working condition. On the other hand, a charge of explosives under the breech of the gun was hardly likely to add optimism to the crews of the anti-tank HPs, many of whom were poorly trained. In addition to technical difficulties, the poor training of German tankers fighting on Jagdtigers at the end of World War II became a serious problem for the Reich's tank forces.